Today I'd like to look at a very beautiful endgame combination, and one which actually has a very strange history, which we'll get into after we look at the puzzle itself. But the position you see before you is sort of illustrates the main idea from a game, or a couple of games, as you'll find out, that were played about 70 years ago. And it's just an incredible combination, so let's take a look. First move isn't that hard to find, so you might want to pause it and look for it, but some of the follow-ups are just incredible. So this is black to move and win. And black started with rook takes b2. Now what we're going to see in this combination is the power of passed pawns, especially against knights, which can look kind of clumsy against them. And also we're going to see how these two pawns work together, and rather than being sort of the weakness that doubled isolated pawns usually are, they become very powerful and help each other promote. And we're also going to see some things about playing with pawns against pieces and the power that once connected pawns get to the edge of the board, they really are almost unstoppable. So after rook takes c2, really the only choice, rook takes b2, the only choice for white is knight takes b2. I mean, if he moves his knight, he's just lost a pawn for nothing, and these passed c pawns are going to become a major problem. So now we have knight takes b2, pretty much forced, and black plays c3. And as we can see, this pawn is already dangerously close to queening, and because of the pawn behind it, the rook can't really get around to stop the pawn. So the knight has to find somewhere to go, but knights are kind of clumsy against pawns, and this is especially true against rook pawns, but even here. So if, for example, knight a4, stopping the pawn is going to be hopeless. There's no way the knight can get to cover his c1. So the only way he can try to contest, prevent the pawn from queening is knight d3. This is the only knight move, but knight d3 actually loses to c4 check. Now, obviously, if the knight moves, to f2 or the king moves, black is just going to play c2, he's going to take the knight or play c2 and win. Say king h1, just takes the knight, and now we have connected passed pawns on the 6th. This is absolutely hopeless. There's nothing the rook can do to stop them. If, for example, here, just going to push here, or even push the other way, and black is just winning here. There's no way to stop the pawns. So king h1 doesn't work. If something like knight f2, we'll just play c2, and the pawn's going to promote. So the only try is rook takes b6, and the idea being if black recaptures with a takes b6, knight c1 blockades the pawns, and white is going to win this because he's going to march his king over to the queen side, and these pawns cannot promote. So a takes b6 loses, but fortunately for black, black has the wonderful move c takes d3. Now the rook is hanging, and there's no way the rook can stop these pawns. If the king moves, obviously black can just take the rook, so the rook has to move. And if it tries to get behind the pawn, something like c2 is just going to win. Or actually d2. Just wins immediately. The point being that if the rook takes d1 queen, and if the rook comes here, we're just going to play c2. Now if the rook takes c1 queen. So against rook c6, c2 just wins, so the rook can't do that. The rook can try to maybe come in front of the pawns, but again, this is hopeless. Just here and here, and this just illustrates how powerful connected passed pawns can be, that they're too much for even the rook to stop. So after knight d3, c4 check is going to win, because we have the wonderful c takes d3. Connected pawns on the 6th are as strong, if not stronger, than a lone rook. They're stronger than a lone rook. So knight d3 loses, so there's no way the knight can stop the pawns from queening. So the only try is rook takes b6. The idea being that, like in the variation before, a takes b6, knight d3, and the white knight, after, say, here, is just going to come to c1, and he has a blockade, and white's going to win this. Fortunately for black, after rook takes b4, black has just an absolutely stunning move. You might want to pause it and look. But the idea being that we want to try to exploit the awkwardness of this knight and a way to sort of push this pawn through. Obviously, taking the rook fails, taking the knight fails. The only move to win is c4. Incredible. The point is that the knight can no longer come to d3 to stop the pawn from pushing, since if it comes to d3, we'll just capture it, and now we win as before. So if knight takes here, pushing the pawn wins. Note that we're going to queen with check, probably winning this knight, and also the rook is still hanging. So black just wins this after c2. And now, finally, In fact, after knight takes c4, taking on b6 also... No. Okay, c2 is what wins. So, knight takes c4 doesn't work. Moving the rook obviously doesn't work, since any sort of rook move is met by this, and these pawns, again, we're going to get connected past pawns. This one's going to promote, and now black is just going to win. Or rook b6 will just take the rook, obviously. So, after c4, the only try is rook b4. Now, the point being that it's a good idea, because now if takes here, white will just take the pawn, and white's winning. If pawn pushes, black will just take the pawn and win. Fortunately, black again has an incredible resource. Using his final pawn, a5, and now there's nothing white can do. The game is hopeless. If, for example, rook takes c4, as we mentioned before, c takes b2 just wins. The wonderful part about a5 is now the knight can't come back to b4, so there's no way to keep the pawn from promoting. So the only other try, really, any sort of rook move is just going to be met by c2. The only other try is knight takes c4, but c2 wins. Now, apparently white in the game, resigned after c2. And the point being that there's no way the rook can really stop the pawn. This rook is hanging, so say rook b3, c1 queen, king f2, and now we just play queen takes c4, and black has a winning game. So, a beautiful combination that started with rook takes b2, and then we saw that these pawns rapidly start moving down the board. And the supposedly weak doubled isolated pawns are actually an incredible strength for black. We have c4, rook b4, and now with the wonderful a5, knight c4, and c2, and black wins. So now a little bit about the strange history of this game. This game actually first came to attention and became very famous when a player named Sanz, Ortueta and Sanz, I think they were from Spain, in 1933 played this game and published this game, and a lot of people saw it, and obviously the combination was so beautiful that it got a lot of attention. It's hard to believe those even in a game. This is a slightly modified version of that position. Let me show you the actual one right here. This was the actual game, and again, all the analysis is about the same. What I just showed you is a little bit different because there are other ways for black to win this, but rook takes b2 is obviously the best. So this is where it first came to attention. However, something very strange happened a little while later, and that's that it was soon exposed, or later came to light, many years later I think, I'm not really sure, came to light that a combination exactly like this had been played 2 years earlier in 1931, I think in Poland, in the game Tilkowski-Wojciechowski, and the position was like this. So the pawns are slightly different, but it's the exact same combination. Rook takes b2, c3, here, c4, same ideas, and black wins. So I don't know if it's sort of unknown if the one 2 years later, Sanz had just seen this, and then that was a hoax, or if this exact combination happened, beautiful combination, happened to occur twice in two different games. It's hard to know. It's a wonderful position, though, and it clearly has a bizarre history since this combination has occurred possibly twice by chance. And there's an interesting website that actually talks about the history of this position. I'll post the link below the video. I hope you found it interesting, and this is one of the nicest chess combinations